few people have asked whether I could review Rosa watercolours, and if you haven't heard of them, they are watercolours made in the Ukraine. They are suggested as a replacement for white night watercolours, which are Russian. They apparently have a very similar sort of consistency and pigment loading. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war there, people are no longer importing Russian goods. And even if they were available, many people, of course, would not want to be using them. So when I saw a dot card, I thought, oh, that's good. I could try these out without making a large investment. The dot card cost about £1. Of course, as I looked at the Rosa watercolours, various colours caught my eye, so these weren't that cheap. They cost about £3.50 per tube, which for artist quality watercolours is very good value. They're 10 millilitres, and I thought, well, I'll treat myself to some unusual colours and I'll get this little dot card and see what the basics are like. So let's swatch them out. I'm going to spray the dot card just to release some of that colour, make a total mess, no doubt. So what I've done is write out the colours, and I've put a black line so we can sort of assess the transparency. This is cadmium yellow light. It's a lovely bright yellow, and we'll pull that across the line and also just fade it off to see how it dilutes. Golden yellow, that's PY 101. If you don't know what these PYs and PRs and things are, they're the pigment codes. So P is always pigment, Y yellow, R red, etc. And it allows you to compare paints across different brands so that you can say, well, hopefully if you find a PY35 in Rosa and a PY35 in, I don't know, Cyrillic, you can think they're going to be similar. Doesn't always work that way, but at least you're along the same lines. It's useful to know whether you've got one or two pigments in a mix, and it can really help knowing what your pigments are. So this is cadmium red here, and that's looking pretty opaque. We won't really be able to make a judgment until they're dried, but it's useful to know whether your pigments are opaque or transparent, so that can really help you in your painting. Oh, that's olive green. Isn't that a nice colour? Then we've got just what they call green, which is a sort of phthalo green. But that's nice. That's like a fir tree green, isn't it? Beautiful, rich indigo there. So there, I've dried those. There are 70 colours in the Rosa range, and the company says they're made with organic gum arabic. They are really light fast. They have high light fast ratings, very high quality pigments and a high pigment loading. There's a mixture of organic and inorganic pigments. And one thing that they say is that they develop all their paints in association with professional artists right from the beginning. They claim that they are easily diluted and easy to pick up, and that the pigments are exactly the same whether you get tubes or whether you get pans. So that's what they say. Let's have a look. I certainly found they were very easy to pick up, and they are beautiful, bright colours. We'll go through. This cadmium yellow is sort of semi-opaque. You can see it over that black line. Interestingly, don't know if you can see, I'll lift this up. Can you see they've got a red N there and a GN there? I had to look up what it meant because there's an explanation, but I certainly don't read Russian. So N means there's some natural pigment in there, and G means it granulates, which is bizarre because here, this cadmium red light, they say is a granulating one. I certainly can see no evidence of that. I know this wasn't the best test for granulation, but I would be really surprised if that cadmium red granulates. Beautiful magenta. Love this olive green. Sorry, I should have said very transparent. This is sort of semi-opaque again, very transparent. Ultramarine is one of the best known of the granulating pigments, and that's semi-opaque. The indigo, semi-opaque. Burnt sienna is lovely and very transparent, which is great. And then they say that the sepia is semi-opaque, but to me that looks pretty transparent. So I'm loving those. The other thing I like to do is to see how well they lift. So what I'm going to do is get a flat brush and basically scrub at the dry paint to see how well that lifts off, because of course that is terribly useful if you need to correct your work. So that cadmium yellow didn't lift very well, but the golden yellow is. Cadmium red's lifting. I wouldn't expect this magenta to lift very well. Actually a bit better than I anticipated. Wouldn't expect this phthalo green to lift that well. Yeah, that ultramarine works pretty well. The indigo doesn't lift terribly well, but I'm not surprised because there's phthalo blue in there. That burnt sienna, not too bad. And the sepia, not too bad. So particularly the indigo and the magenta, and indeed that cad yellow, not lifting terribly well. So we would call those staining colours, and it's really worth knowing about that. They could be great for first layers because they won't lift when you glaze over the top, or if you need to adjust them because you've gone too dark or too rich with a colour, you know you potentially might have problems. I certainly found these release the colour from the dots, so they seem to re-wet really nicely, and if you were using pans I think you wouldn't have any problems. Rosa has two ranges. They've got the gallery range, which is their artist range, and then they've got what they call the studio range, which is their student range. Let's have a little look at the tubes I treated myself to. Right, we'll swatch these out. So the bright blue is a phthalo blue. Oh, that's gorgeous. Look at that. I do adore phthalo blue. Let's try this royal brown. That is a beautiful rich colour. I bought it because I am very, very fond of burnt sienna, and I wondered whether this really rich orangey brown might be quite fun. Oh, that's darker than I expected. This is violet black, and it's a granulating colour. I'll need to put, I can see the violet coming through when you get lots of water on it. I thought that quin lilac would be nice. That's quite interesting to compare what that's going to be like against, say, the magenta next to it. Then I chose this magenta grey, which is a granulating colour. Oh, that's rather pretty. Look at that colour. Now, I'm a huge fan of Quin Gold. Use it lots. That looks a little bit more opaque than I would have expected. Let me look closely at the tube. Tube often will have lots of really useful information on it. It says it's transparent. Hopefully you can see that little square. So if it's not filled in, it means it's transparent. But that is a little bit more opaque. Maybe when we'll let it dry and make that judgment. Now, I never know quite how you say this. Aureolin? How would you pronounce it? Anyway, beautiful colour. Really transparent yellow there. Really bright. And then I am very fond of brown madder. that sort of rich, lovely colour. Oh, I'm quite pleased with those. To say that bright blue really is quite shocking. The royal brown, I think I will use lots of. Not convinced about that violet black, whether it'll be very useful. The Quin Lilac like that. That magenta grey is very nice. And it says it's a granulating colour, and I can sort of see some granulation going on there. I think that could be quite lovely for landscapes. So need to let that dry, the Quin Gold, to see how opaque that actually is. Love that yellow, the Aureolin or Orolin. Who knows. And then that brown madder is a lot redder than I was expecting. I was expecting a bit more on the brown side, but looks like an absolutely beautiful colour. Interesting, it says it is semi-transparent on here, and that looks pretty transparent to me, so don't always have to agree with what the manufacturers say. So it's always worth swatching out and just seeing what you think. I'd actually need to use these in a painting to really put them through their paces, but my initial reaction is that these look like beautiful colours. So if you are looking for an alternative to White Nights, or you're looking for a very cost-effective artist quality watercolour, or indeed you'd just like to support Ukraine industry, I think these Rosa watercolours are looking really promising.